The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The hologram flickers. Ahsoka watches the blue-white static resolve into Anakin's face, older than she remembers, or maybe just tired in a way the war has carved permanent, and feels the familiar pull of wanting to say nothing at all. It would be easier. It always is. She is standing in a cramped, calm alcove aboard the command ship. The distant sounds of Mandalore's orbital defense grid cycling through its checks somewhere below her feet. Rex is 2 corridors away, running the 332nd through breach protocols. The siege hasn't started yet. There is still time to keep this call brief. Professional, warm in the surface way they have managed for months now, the way that costs her nothing and asks nothing of him. She opens her mouth to do exactly that. Then she thinks of Maul's eyes. "It's good to see you, Snips." Anakin's voice carries the old warmth, the easy grin folded underneath it. "You look like you haven't slept in 3 days." 2, she said. "The 3rd day I managed 4 hours." He laughed. It costs him something, she can see. There are shadows under his eyes that mirror hers. And his jaw carries a tension he's not releasing even now. Whatever is happening on Coruscant, it is not light. "How close are you?" he asked. "Hours. Rex has the assault team staged." She paused. Let the silence carry for 1 beat. "Anakin, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it." The grin faded. Not into suspicion, into attention. He recognized her serious voice the way he recognized his own lightsaber hilt. "I'm listening." She breathed. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way it has not been, even in her own mind, since the throne room duel 2 days ago. She has turned the words over in the dark watches between mission prep cycles, arranged and rearranged them. Looked for a version that didn't sound like accusation or paranoia, or the desperate reach of someone who has spent too long outside the Order and lost perspective on how these things work. She hasn't found one. So, she uses the plain version. "Maul told me something. During our encounter on Mandalore. Before I had him contained." She held his gaze through the distortion of the signal. "He said that Darth Sidious orchestrated the entire war. Both sides. That the Separatists aren't an insurgency. They are a mechanism. And he said Sidious has his eye on you. Specifically, that you're," she stopped. Chose the next words carefully, "that you are the key to everything he's been building." The silence on the other end was not brief. Anakin's face did not move. That was the thing that told her she'd hit something real. Not disbelief, not the sharp dismissal she had halfway expected, but a stillness that looked like a man pressing down hard on something that was trying to surface. "Maul," he said finally, "is a fanatic and a manipulator who will say whatever." "I know what Maul is," she said. "I've studied him. I fought him. I was there when he killed Satine Kryze to break Obi-Wan, and I know what a psychological weapon looks like when it's being deployed." She took 1 step closer to the projector. "This wasn't that. Anakin, he wasn't warning me out of goodwill. He wanted me to help him kill you. He laid out exactly what Sidious intends to do with you. And then he asked me to stand aside and let him stop it first." The silence this time was shorter and sharper. "He asked you to, yes." She held his gaze. "I didn't. That's why I'm making this call instead." The muscle in Anakin's jaw moved. Once, he looked off to the side of the frame, not dismissively. She recognized the gesture. It was the same one he made when running rapid calculations. When the tactical situation had just shifted, and he was redrawing the map behind his eyes. She pressed on. "I know how it sounds. I know I've been outside the Order, and I know the Council will." She caught herself. "I'm not bringing this to the Council. I'm bringing it to you. Because if there is any chance Maul was telling the truth, even a partial chance, I need you to know before you walk back into that building." She gestured vaguely toward the sky, toward Coruscant somewhere across the hyperspace distance between them. "I need you to be careful." Anakin turned back to face her directly. "Tell me everything he said," he said. Exactly, in the order he said it. So she did. It took 11 minutes. She laid it out in sequence. The duel. The moment Maul had stopped attacking and started talking. His precise words about the war's architecture. About Sidious's control of both the Republic Senate and the Separatist leadership. About the thing Maul called Sidious's great design that required Anakin specifically and not any other Jedi. About what Maul had asked her to do. And why. And about the way Maul's voice had changed when he spoke of his former master, dropping the performance entirely and becoming something close to raw fear. She did not editorialize. She gave him the facts the way Rex gave her battlefield reports. Anakin listened without interrupting once. When she finished, the hologram hummed between them. Outside the alcove, she could hear a clone trooper running a systems check on something, his voice carrying down the corridor in clipped numbers. "The Chancellor has been grooming me," Anakin said. Not as a revelation. As a man confirming, aloud, something he has been refusing to name for a long time. The words sat between them. "Since I was 9 years old," he continued, his voice very even, very quiet, in the way she knew meant he was keeping something compressed. "He's always been. He positioned himself as the one who understood me. When the Council wouldn't grant me mastery. When Obi-Wan was. When I felt like the Order saw me as a problem to be managed. A breath. He was always there." "Anakin, no, I'm not," he stopped himself. Started again. "I need to think about this clearly. Not the way I would have thought about it an hour ago." His eyes met hers through the distortion. "If what Maul said is true. If Sidious is real and he is who Maul says he is, then every moment of doubt I've ever had about the Council, every argument, every time I've felt the Jedi were holding something back from me, I have to ask how much of that was mine, and how much of that was manufactured." The knowledge sits in his chest. She could see it. Not grief yet. Something that would become grief when he had time to let it. "That's the right question," she said quietly. "What do I do with it?" She had thought about this too, in the dark corridors between sleep and duty. Nothing yet. Nothing that looks like anything. If Sidious is as embedded as Maul claimed, any sudden change in your behavior is noticed. You stay exactly as you are. You go back to those council sessions. You take whatever assignment he gives you and you perform every frustration exactly as he expects. She met his eyes. "And you don't tell the council. Not yet. Not until we know more. Not until we're certain who can be trusted with this." Anakin was quiet for a long moment. Then, something in his face shifted. Not dramatically. A small thing. The kind of thing that would be invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years learning to read him through helmet visors and bad comm signals, and the particular language of a man who kept himself locked down at all times. A loosening. As if a wire that had been tightened one full revolution past its tolerance had finally been given a half-turn back. "You could have said nothing," he said. "You had every reason to keep this off the record. If you're wrong, it makes you look, I know. Then why?" She looked at him. The answer was simple. It had always been simple, even when everything between them had been complicated. "Because you're my master," she said. "And because if the situation were reversed, I would want you to tell me." The hologram held his face still for a moment. Then, "Be careful on Mandalore. Snips, always. I mean it." The grin was gone entirely. In its place was something she had seen rarely. Anakin Skywalker without the armor of ease and deflection, looking directly at her. "Come back. I trust you," she said. "Trust me. A beat." "I do," he said. "I always did." The hologram cut out. She stood in the alcove for exactly 3 seconds. Then she straightened, turned, and walked toward the sound of Rex's voice counting down breach protocols in the corridor. Whatever came next would come. The message had been sent, and he had heard it, and nothing about the next several days would be simple. But the silence she had carried from their last conversation, that particular weight, was gone. She moved through the ship toward war, lighter than she had been in months. The council chamber at dawn. 12 seats in a circle, most of them occupied by holograms, masters stretched thin across a dozen active fronts, their blue-white images flickering with the latency of deep space transmission. The morning light through the chamber's tall windows is pale and cold. Coruscant's sun still climbing behind the cityscape, the spires of the temple catching it first and holding it like a warning. Anakin sits in his seat. He has not slept. He looks, he knows, exactly like a man who has not slept, which is useful, because a man who has not slept is what the Council expects to see. What they do not know is the reason. They will read it as frustration, as the ongoing friction between Anakin Skywalker and the body that refused him mastery, as the particular restlessness of a general being kept close to home while his former mentor chases Grievous across the Outer Rim. They have read versions of this face on him for months. They will not look deeper. He is counting on that. Mace Windu spoke first, as Mace Windu almost always did. His voice carried its customary weight, deliberate, unhurried, each word placed with the precision of a man who understood that authority lived in cadence as much as content. The situation on Utapau is developing as anticipated, Mace said. Kenobi has confirmed Grievous's position. The assault will proceed within the day. Murmurs of acknowledgement from the assembled holograms. Kit Fisto. Plo Koon, his signal washing slightly in the distance. Ki Adi Mundi from somewhere in the Outer Rim, jaw set in the particular way it got when he was operating on insufficient sleep. Anakin said nothing. He catalogued the room instead, a habit he'd had since before the war. Sharpened by 2 decades of combat into something automatic. Read the space, read the people in it, map the exits and the allegiances. He did it now with new parameters running underneath the old ones. Who in this room could he trust with what Ahsoka told him? Mace Windu, possibly. The man was incorruptible in the way granite was incorruptible, inflexible, cold in temperature if not in conviction, but genuinely dedicated to the Order's purpose. The difficulty with Mace was not his loyalty but his certainty. Tell Mace Windu that the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic was a Sith Lord, based on the testimony of Darth Maul relayed through a former Padawan, currently operating outside the Order's authority, and Mace's response would be immediate, institutional, and catastrophically visible. Yoda. The same problem. Different shape. Yoda's wisdom was genuine. Anakin had learned, slowly and against resistance, to respect it. But Yoda operated through the Council, through consensus, through the careful structures of the Order that Palpatine had spent decades learning to read from the outside. Any movement Yoda made would be felt. No. Not yet. Not here. Not in this room. Not until there was more than Maul's word and the cold arithmetic of Anakin's own reconstructed memories. He needed Obi-Wan. The session ran 90 minutes. Anakin contributed exactly enough to avoid notice. A tactical observation about the Separatist supply chains through the Hydean Way, a question about relief coordination on Felucia that he already knew the answer to. Mace watched him twice with that particular still-eyed attention that meant he was filing something away. Anakin let him. Let the filing happen. Whatever Mace was cataloging was the performance, not the thing underneath it. When the session ended and the holograms dissolved, he moved through the temple corridors at his usual pace. Not hurried, not distracted. Nodded to a pair of Padawans crossing the atrium below, accepted a data slate from a temple administrator without stopping to read it. The comm room he needed was 3 levels below the main operations center, in a section of the temple that handled encrypted wartime communications, the kind of room that saw heavy traffic during active campaigns and almost none during the quiet between. This morning it was empty. He had checked the duty roster before the council session. He had 4 minutes before the next scheduled technician rotation. He sat down at the secondary console, the one positioned away from the room's only monitoring panel, and pulled up a frequency allocation table. There was a sequence buried in the standard tactical band, 3 digits transposed from their filed position. A cipher he and Obi-Wan had established 3 years ago during a particularly sensitive operation in the Outer Rim that neither of them had ever submitted a full report on. The kind of operational shorthand that accumulated between 2 people who had spent enough time in the field together that words became redundant and procedures became instinct. He keyed it now. The connection was slow. Utapau was at the edge of range, and the encryption added latency. He watched the authentication cycle through its handshake and thought about what he was going to say, and in what order, and how much. The channel opened. Static. Then the familiar cadence of Obi-Wan Kenobi's breathing, which had been the sound of safety for so long that Anakin still felt something shift in his chest every time he heard it, even now, even after everything. "This is an unusual frequency," Obi-Wan said carefully. "Not I didn't expect to hear from you, not the easy warmth of a scheduled call." He heard it immediately, the cipher, the significance of it. "I need 8 minutes," Anakin said, "and I need you to not ask me questions until I'm finished." A pause. Short. "Go ahead." He said it the same way Ahsoka had said it to him, in sequence, without editorializing, facts in the order they had arrived. He gave Obi-Wan the conversation on the holonet. He gave him Maul's words as Ahsoka had relayed them, including what Maul had asked of her, the choice she had refused. He gave him the architecture, both sides of the war, the Chancellor's design, the 20 years of careful cultivation, the specific and deliberate targeting of Anakin as the instrument of whatever endpoint Sidious was building toward. He kept his voice level throughout. He had been practicing level since the hologram cut out last night. When he finished, the silence on the other end stretched long enough that he checked the connection. "I'm here," Obi-Wan said. Another pause. "Anakin," his voice had changed. Not broken, Obi-Wan's voice almost never broke, but the architecture of its usual careful composure had shifted slightly. The way a building shifts before anything visible happens to it. "How certain are you?" Maul was afraid. Anakin said, "I've seen Maul fight, I've seen him operate. He was afraid of exactly one thing in his entire life, and it was his former master. And he was afraid enough of that master to ask Ahsoka to help him kill me, instead of simply escaping. Ahsoka's read on the encounter is reliable. Her read on people is better than mine." "Yes," Obi-Wan said. "Quiet. It usually is. I can't move yet. I can't change anything visible. If Palpatine has sources inside the Senate, inside the temple, any shift in my behavior toward him—" "I understand," Obi-Wan said. The words came quickly now, the thinking moving faster underneath them. "You maintain everything as it is. Every session, every conversation, every apparent frustration. Nothing changes on the surface. Nothing. And the Council? Not yet." Anakin kept his voice flat. "When we have more than Maul's testimony filtered through 2 relays, we bring Mace in. Until then it is the 2 of us," Obi-Wan said. "And Ahsoka." A beat. "And Ahsoka?" Obi-Wan agreed. Something in his voice when he said her name, not quite grief, not quite pride, a complicated note that Anakin recognized, because he carried a version of it himself. "Is she safe?" "She was beginning the siege of Mandalore when we spoke. She has Rex." "Good, meaning, that's as safe as anyone gets in this war." Obi-Wan. Anakin stopped, started again. How long do you think don't?" Obi-Wan said gently. "Not yet. That calculation has time. What doesn't have time is Utapau. I need to finish what I came here to do, and you need to walk back out of that comm room looking exactly like a man who made a routine encrypted check-in." The practicality of it landed like a hand on his shoulder. "Grounding, I know," Anakin said. "We will sort through the rest of it," Obi-Wan said. "Together as we always have. You can't come back yet. Grievous will be handled by the end of the day." The calm certainty of a man who has assessed the tactical situation and arrived at a conclusion he finds boring in its inevitability. "After that, I am available." Anakin almost smiled. It pulled at something sore. "Be careful," he said. "Always," Obi-Wan replied. Then dry, with the particular timing that meant he was deploying humor precisely because the alternative was something neither of them had language for, though I note that's rather rich coming from you. The channel closed. Anakin sat for 3 seconds in the empty comm room, the low hum of the console the only sound. The morning light through the single high window making a pale rectangle on the floor in front of him. Then he stood, straightened his tunic, picked up the data slate he'd carried in, and walked back out into the corridor. He had a meeting with the Chancellor in 2 hours. He began preparing his face for it. Palpatine's office smelled of old wood and something beneath it, polished stone. Recycled air run through filters that cost more than a clone trooper's entire production cycle, the faint chemical ghost of whatever candles the Chancellor burned in the private chambers beyond the reception room. It was a smell Anakin had been breathing since he was 9 years old. He noticed it differently now. He stood at the window while Palpatine finished a transmission. Something administrative, a Senate procedural matter that required the Chancellor's seal, nothing that required Anakin's attention. He had been invited to wait. He waited. Outside, Coruscant's morning traffic moved in its vast arterial patterns, speeder lanes stacked 40 deep in some corridors, the city planet conducting its ordinary business beneath a sky that looked the same as it always had. He kept his breathing even. He kept his hands loose at his sides. He had been doing this for 2 hours, across 2 earlier stops in the temple, and 1 brief conversation with a Senate aide in a corridor near the executive building's main atrium, maintaining the surface, running the performance, being exactly the Anakin Skywalker that everyone expected to find. It was exhausting in a way combat never was. Combat demanded everything but asked for none of it to be hidden. This asked for the opposite. "My boy." Palpatine's voice, warm and familiar, arriving from behind him. "Forgive me. The Senate finds endless ways to consume a morning." Anakin turned from the window. "I didn't mind waiting." Palpatine crossed toward him with the slightly careful movement of a man in his 70s, measured, deliberate, each step placed with the consideration of age. He wore his Chancellor's robes in deep burgundy today, the hood thrown back, his face arranged in the expression Anakin now understood he reserved for these private meetings. The fond elder, the confidant, the one person in the galaxy who had never asked Anakin to be anything other than what he was. The performance of it. "You look tired," Palpatine observed, settling into the chair near the window and gesturing for Anakin to take the one opposite. His eyes moved across Anakin's face with genuine attentiveness, reading it, cataloging it, running his own assessments underneath the surface warmth. "The council sessions are wearing on you." "It's nothing," Anakin said. He sat. "I slept badly." Palpatine folded his hands in his lap. "They push you hard, Anakin. Even now, when the war nears its end, they find new ways to remind you of your place in their hierarchy." A small, regretful pause. The denial of mastery was not an oversight. "You understand that." "I understand that I've been patient," Anakin said. The right note, not quite anger, not quite resignation. The tone Palpatine expected, had cultivated carefully over months of similar conversations. Patience has its limits. Palpatine's voice was gentle, sorrowful on his behalf, in the way it always was, even for the most gifted Jedi in a generation, even for a man who has given everything to this war and this republic. Anakin looked at the floor. Let the silence sit. Let Palpatine read whatever he needed to read in it. He thought about Ahsoka's voice on the hologram. He thought about Obi-Wan's breathing on the encrypted channel. He thought, 2 more days, maybe 3. "I appreciate your faith in me," he said. "More than I've probably said." Palpatine smiled. It reached his eyes, which was the most dangerous thing about him. "You never need to say it, my boy. I have always known." He left the executive building 40 minutes later. He walked 3 blocks through the Senate district before flagging a public transport, riding it 6 stops east, and transferring twice before arriving at a building he had not visited in 4 years. A mid-level residential complex in one of the Senate district's older sectors, the kind of address that attracted low-ranking government workers and retired officers, and people who needed proximity to the district without the expense of its center. He had used this building during the war for exactly 2 operations, both of which remained unlogged in the official record. The unit he needed was on the 14th floor. He knocked. Bail Organa opened the door. The apartment was not Bail's. It belonged to a retired Republic Survey Corps administrator who had emigrated to Alderaan 2 years ago and had never formally filed the change of address, a bureaucratic gap that Bail's office had identified and quietly preserved for situations requiring a meeting place that did not appear on any schedule. Bail was already in his jacket, no Senate robes. His bearing carrying the particular contained energy of a man who had been waiting and had used the waiting productively. "Senator," Anakin said. "General." Bail closed the door behind him, ran a brief check of the room's portable signal damper, a small device sitting on the kitchen counter that was technically illegal under 3 separate Senate communications statutes, and turned to face him. Obi-Wan contacted me this morning. I know. I asked him to. Bail absorbed this without visible reaction. He was. Anakin had come to understand over years of overlapping wartime operations, one of the most genuinely unflappable people he had ever encountered. Not because nothing moved him, but because he had long ago separated the processing of information from the performance of receiving it. He felt things later, privately, when there was time. "Tell me what you need," Bail said. Anakin sat down at the small table near the window. Outside, a maintenance droid crawled slowly along the building's exterior, cleaning grime from the transparent steel panels in methodical stripes. "I need the Senate side, documented," he said. "Not now, not filed anywhere, documented and held. If what we believe is true, there will come a point where the evidence of Palpatine's manipulation of emergency powers, his influence over the Military Creation Act, his expansion of executive authority beyond the Constitution's boundaries, all of it needs to be ready. When this moves into the open, the Senate needs something to work with immediately. Something that makes the dissolution of his emergency powers automatic rather than a fight." Bail was quiet for a moment. "Padmé has been building that case for 18 months, he said. "Not because she suspected what you're describing, because she's Padmé, and she documents everything as a matter of principle. Can you access it without alerting anyone?" She would need to be told. Anakin had known this was coming. He had spent the walk to the transport working through it and arriving at the same answer each time. "Tell her," he said. "She can know everything." He stopped, kept his voice level. "She is careful, and she has clearances that neither of us have in the Senate building." Bail nodded once. No questions about the personal dimension of it, which was one of the reasons Anakin had asked him specifically. "Anyone else?" "Not yet. The smaller this is, the longer it stays intact." He looked across the table. "Obi-Wan will have finished on Utapau by tonight. When he's back, we'll have the military side coordinated. I need you to be the Senate side. Padmé holds the evidence. When the moment comes, everything activates at once. And the Jedi Council? 2 members. Mace Windu and Yoda, brought in at the last possible moment before we move. Not before. Mace especially. He doesn't have a deceptive bone in his body, which is admirable and currently a logistical problem. Something moved across Bail's face that might, in a less controlled man, have become a smile. He'll find that assessment unflattering. He'll survive it. Bail stood, moved to the counter, poured 2 cups of something from a carafe that had been sitting warm. He set one in front of Anakin without asking if he wanted it. "How are you holding up?" The question was direct and genuine, asked without the performance of concern that most people deployed when they sensed someone was carrying something heavy. Bail asked it the way he handled everything, practically, as a data point that mattered to the planning. Anakin looked at the cup. "I had breakfast with the man this morning who has been." He stopped. I sat across from him. I listened to him tell me that the council doesn't appreciate my worth. I said the right things. He picked up the cup. "I'll do it again tomorrow." "Yes," Bail said. "You will." No comfort offered beyond the acknowledgement. Anakin found, to his own surprise, that he preferred it. "There's one more thing," Anakin said. "Ahsoka is finishing the siege of Mandalore. She'll have Maul in custody when it's done. He is the only living witness to Sidious's explicit self-identification, the only being who can testify from direct personal experience about what Palpatine is." He met Bail's eyes. "We need him alive, and we need him somewhere that Palpatine cannot reach." Bail considered this for exactly the time it required. "Alderaan, can you arrange transport? By the time Ahsoka needs it." "Yes." Anakin set down the cup and stood. The maintenance droid outside had finished its row and was starting another, moving with the patient repetition of something that had no awareness of the extraordinary thing being planned 14 floors away from its cleaning path. "Senator," he said, "if this goes wrong, it won't." Bail said. "Not reassurance. Assessment." Anakin nodded. He pulled his hood up, moved toward the door and paused with his hand on the frame. "Thank you," he said, "for not asking me why I trust Ahsoka's red on this over my own judgment." Bail looked at him steadily. "Because she was right," he said, "and you knew it the moment she told you." Anakin had no answer for that. He left. Camino at night. The cloning facilities rise from the ocean on their stilted platforms, like something dreamed by a species that had never learned to fear the water beneath them. The sea is black and enormous and indifferent, the waves hitting the support columns in long, slow rhythms that the structure absorbs without complaint. Rain sweeps across the upper observation decks in horizontal sheets. It is always raining on Camino. The planet seems to have no other setting. Anakin stands at the edge of the landing platform and lets it hit him. He arrived 2 hours ago on a logistics inspection, a legitimate one, filed and approved. The kind of routine wartime visit that a senior general might make to the primary clone production facility without raising any flags in any direction. The manifest lists him as auditing accelerated growth cycle outputs for the Outer Rim campaign. The manifest is accurate. The audit happened. He spent 40 minutes with the Kaminoan Prime Minister, Lama Su, reviewing production numbers he did not particularly care about, and asking the questions a general auditing production numbers would ask. Then he asked to see the medical wing. The Kaminoan doctor's name was Nala Se. She was tall even by Kaminoan standards, her neck carrying that particular graceful length that made their species look perpetually contemplative, her black eyes holding the careful neutrality of a scientist who had learned, working under wartime contract, that the safest expression was no expression at all. She met him in the corridor outside the primary growth chamber, her white coat immaculate against the facility's cold blue lighting. "General Skywalker," she said, "this is outside your filed inspection parameters." "I know," Anakin said. "I'd like to discuss the inhibitor chips." Nothing moved in her face. Which was, itself, a kind of answer. "The behavioral modification implants are a standard component of the growth process," she said. "Commissioned under Republic contract and—" "I know what they were commissioned as," Anakin said. His voice was quiet. He kept it that way. "I also know what Fives found. The corridor was empty." He had made certain of that before speaking, checked the security rotation, noted the gap in camera coverage at this junction that had existed, unfixed, for long enough that either no one had noticed or someone had decided not to fix it. Nala Se was very still. "Fives was unstable," she said. "His chip malfunctioned. His perceptions in his final days were accurate," Anakin said. "Weren't they?" The silence between them was long and specific, and had the quality of a door being held shut against something heavy on the other side. "I am not here to report you," he said. "I'm not here to file anything or flag anything or create a record of this conversation. I need your help, and I need it done quietly, and when it's finished you will have the complete and documented protection of a senior Jedi general in whatever comes next." He held her gaze. "I need the chips removed. From every active clone currently deployed in the Grand Army." Nala Se looked at him for a long moment. "You understand what you're describing," she said finally. "Not a question. I understand it's logistically complicated." "It is not logistically complicated," she said, with the precise flatness of a scientist correcting a civilian's underestimation. "It is logistically impossible within any time frame that would be operationally relevant. We are speaking of approximately 1.2 million individual surgical procedures on soldiers currently deployed across, not surgery." Anakin said. "That's not what I'm asking for." She stopped. "Fives's autopsy," Anakin said. "The chip analysis done after his death. There was a solvent interaction noted in the secondary pathology report, a compound introduced during his final medical treatment that had begun breaking down the chip's outer casing before he died. I need to know if that compound, or something derived from it, could be weaponized as an aerosol." The black eyes moved across his face in a way that felt like a scan. "You want a delivery mechanism," she said. "Something that could be introduced into a ventilation system. Or a water reclamation cycle, something that reaches every trooper on a ship or in a base without requiring individual procedures." He held still under her assessment. Something that degrades the chip's functionality without being detectable as anything other than trace medical compound in a standard tox screen. Nala Se turned and walked 12 paces to the wall panel. She pulled up something on the display. Not patient files, not the growth chamber readouts. A chemical formulation table that she had to navigate 4 submenus to reach. She had navigated there quickly. Without looking at him, she said, "The compound you're referencing is a chelating agent we used in the inhibitor chip's original bonding process. We identified its degradation properties during the Fives incident, and..." A pause. "Filed a report indicating the interaction was anomalous and unlikely to recur. But you kept the formulation data." "A scientist keeps formulation data," she said, in a tone that suggested this was the only answer she intended to give on that subject. "Can it be aerosolized?" "A modified derivative, with adjustments to the molecular weight for atmospheric suspension." She studied the display. "It would require a carrier compound already present in standard clone trooper environmental systems to avoid triggering hazmat sensors." "How long to develop the modification? With existing resources and no additional personnel?" She turned back from the display. 72 hours. Perhaps 60 if the carrier compound selection is straightforward. 72 hours. The timeline sat in his chest and pressed against other timelines. Obi-Wan finishing on Utapau, Ahsoka finishing on Mandalore, the Bail Organa evidence package, Palpatine's next scheduled attempt to move Anakin toward whatever the endgame was. Everything compressing toward the same point. "Do it," Anakin said. "Start tonight." "And the distribution mechanism?" Nala Se asked. "Introducing the compound into active deployment ships' environmental systems would require access codes and..." "I'll handle distribution," he said. "I need the compound. You don't need to know the rest." She looked at him with the careful, assessing patience of a being who has spent her career working in the space between what is commissioned and what is right. "There is one more component to this," she said. "The inhibitor chip, once degraded, does not simply become inert. There is a transitional window, approximately 6 to 12 hours post-degradation, where certain clone troopers may experience behavioral anomalies. Confusion, emotional volatility. Some may remember fragments of the suppression. Anakin absorbed this. Will it be dangerous? To the troopers themselves, potentially distressing. To their commanders, manageable if anticipated. She paused. They will need someone they trust to tell them what happened. He thought of Rex. Of the 501st. Of men he had fought beside for 3 years. Men whose names he knew. Men who had carried him off battlefields and followed him into situations that no tactical manual would have endorsed. Men who had chips in their skulls designed to turn them into weapons against every Jedi they had ever served alongside. The knowledge sits in his chest like an ember. "I'll tell them," he said. "Personally." Nala Se held his gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then she turned back to the display and began pulling up the formulation data with the focused efficiency of someone who had already made a decision and was now simply executing it. "General Skywalker," she said, not turning around. "Fives came to me before he went to Coruscant. Before the end." A pause. Her hands moved across the panel. "He asked me to help him. I told him the chips were standard procedure. I told him his concerns were the result of chip malfunction." Another pause, longer. "I have thought about that conversation every day since." Anakin said nothing. He had learned in the last 48 hours that some things did not require a response, that sometimes the only appropriate thing was to let a person hand you the weight they had been carrying, and simply hold it with them for a moment. 60 hours, she said. "I'll have the compound ready in 60 hours. He pulled his hood up and turned toward the corridor. "Doctor," he said, pausing at the junction. "What you're doing, what you're choosing to do now." Fives would have wanted to know about it. She did not answer. But her hands, moving across the display, did not stop. Outside, the rain had not let up. He crossed the landing platform in it, the water running off his hood in streams, the ocean below doing what it always did, enormous and black and patient, hitting the support columns in its long, slow rhythm. He boarded his ship. He sat in the pilot's seat for a moment before reaching for the controls, looking at the facility through the forward viewport, the cold blue light of it, the rain-blurred geometry, the place where 1.2 million soldiers had been grown and fitted with the means of their own corruption. He thought about a mechanic named Fives who had figured it out and died trying to say so. He started the engines. He had 59 hours. The throne room of Mandalore, Sundari's royal palace, rises at the city's center like a fist closed around a memory, all hard geometry and ancient stone, the architecture of a people who built for war, and then spent centuries arguing about whether that was something to be proud of. The throne room itself is vaulted and cold, its walls lined with the sigils of dead houses, the floor a pale stone that shows boot prints and blood in equal measure. 2 of the overhead lights have been destroyed in the fighting. The ones remaining throw hard shadows that make the room look like something from a different era entirely. Ahsoka stands in the center of it with both blades drawn. Across the floor, separated from her by 12 meters of pale stone, Maul watches her the way predators watch things they are not yet certain they can kill. He had been waiting for her. That was the thing she registered first when she came through the throne room's upper entrance, not the wreckage of the guards outside, not the overturned furnishings, not the specific quality of stillness that meant he had been here long enough to make the space his. All of that was peripheral. What she registered first was that he looked afraid. Not obviously. Not in any way that would read to someone who hadn't studied him, who hadn't reviewed every available record of every engagement he'd survived. Maul performed fearlessness the way others performed breathing, automatic, continuous, so deeply habituated that he probably didn't know he was doing it most of the time. But there were tells. The particular set of his jaw, the way his yellow eyes moved across the room's entry points in a sequence that was tactical rather than aggressive. He was mapping exits. He had been doing that since before she arrived. "Ahsoka Tano," he said. His voice filled the vault easily, the resonant baritone of it unchanged from their last encounter. "You came alone." "Rex is managing the outer palace," she said. "He doesn't need me for that part." "No," Maul's eyes moved across her face. "I imagine he doesn't." He ignited his saber. The red blade threw new shadows across the sigils on the wall, doubled the hard light in the room, made everything look more like what it was, a fight about to happen in a place where fights had been happening for 1,000 years. Ahsoka ignited both of hers. He came fast. That was always how he started, the initial assault at full velocity, designed to establish the tempo before the opponent could settle into their own rhythm, to force a reactive posture from the first exchange. It had worked against better-prepared fighters than her. She was not in a reactive posture. She met the first combination cleanly, a high cross deflection, a pivot that let his momentum carry past her, a counter that he slipped narrowly, and felt the difference immediately, not in her body. Her body was the same as it always was, the training and the years of it automatic in the way that only long practice produces. The difference was in her attention. In every fight she had been in before today, some fraction of her awareness had been running a secondary calculation, an assessment of the relational architecture of the people involved, what they thought of her, what she owed them, what she stood to lose. It was not weakness. It was the texture of being someone who cared about things. Today that fraction was quiet. Maul broke left and came back with a diagonal sweep that would have taken her across the midsection. She stepped inside it, redirected it with her left blade, and pushed off his arm with the heel of her right hand, not a force push, just physics, using his own extension against him. He recovered faster than most people would have, spinning into a reset position with the fluid grace of a man who had been fighting since before she was born. He studied her for a moment. "You're different," he said. "Am I?" Something has changed. His head tilted slightly. The yellow eyes moved across her face with the focus of someone reading a language they know well. "You spoke to him." She said nothing. "Skywalker," Maul said. The name landed the way he intended it to, precisely like a blade placed rather than thrown. "You told him what I said." "Still nothing." "And he believed you." The words came out differently than she expected, not with the satisfaction of a manipulation confirmed, but with something more complicated. Something that sat in the space between bitterness and grief. "Of course he did," He always. Maul stopped himself. Reset. When he spoke again, the control was back. It won't matter. You understand that. Sidious has been building this for decades. Whatever you've told Skywalker, whatever you think you've prevented, you haven't prevented anything. You've only warned a man that the trap is closing. The trap still closes. You don't know my master, she said. The words came out flat and certain and completely without heat. Maul stopped circling. She watched something move across his face, not quite surprise, but an adjacent thing. The recalculation of a man whose primary weapon had just failed to find purchase. He had expected that line to cost her something. He had expected her to feel the doubt underneath it, to carry even a fraction of the uncertainty that would give his words somewhere to root. She didn't, because she had heard Anakin's voice on the hologram say, "I trust you," and she knew, not hoped, knew what that meant from him, how rarely he said things he didn't mean, how completely he meant them when he said them. Maul had no access to that knowledge. He was fighting a version of her that no longer existed. "Remarkable," he said quietly. And then he attacked. The middle of the fight was the dangerous part. Maul had not survived everything he had survived by relying on psychology alone. He was Sidious's original instrument, trained from childhood in a tradition that produced the galaxy's most lethal combatants. And he had refined it further through decades of additional violence that the Sith tradition itself hadn't required of him. His form was a synthesis of Juyo and Jarkai counters and a dozen other influences that had no formal name, built from necessity and survival. He gave her the dangerous moment the outline of him had always promised. It came in the fight's third minute, a feint she read correctly that was itself covering a second feint she didn't, and the red blade caught her across the left pauldron, not deep enough to disable, but hot and immediate. The smell of scorched material, sharp in the cold air. She rolled with it, came up on one knee, and felt the burn across her shoulder resolve into something she filed and ignored. Maul pressed the advantage. He was faster at close range than his size suggested, the prosthetic legs giving him a stability in his base that biological joints rarely achieved. And for 4 seconds she was fully in the reactive posture she had not started in. Parrying, retreating, buying space. Then he overextended. It was small, a half-centimeter too much rotation on a downward strike that his own desperation had amplified, the desperation she had been watching build since the moment his psychological weapons found no target. She saw it the way she saw everything in this state, clearly, early, with time to respond before it fully materialized. She stepped inside the strike, crossed both blades to capture his saber, and rotated her entire body weight through the lock. His weapon spun away across the pale stone floor. He had no secondary weapon. She had both of hers at his throat before the red blade stopped spinning. He was breathing hard. She was not. Maul looked at the 2 white blades bracketing his throat, and then looked at her face. And whatever he found there made him very still. "I'm not going to kill you," she said. "You're going to Alderaan. You're going to tell the people I tell you to tell exactly what you told me on this planet." She held his gaze. "You're going to be the witness." Something moved through his expression. The bitterness again, and underneath it the complicated grief. And underneath that something older and more broken that she didn't have a name for. "A witness," he said, as if tasting the word and finding it foreign. The only one who can testify from direct experience. The only being alive who served him and survived and knows what he is. She held the blade steady. "You asked me to help you stop Sidious. This is how we stop him. Not by killing Anakin, by exposing what Sidious has spent 60 years hiding." Maul was quiet for a long moment. The cold room held the silence. The sigils of dead houses watched from the walls. "He'll find me," he said finally. No performance, just the plain fact of it, stated by a man who understood better than anyone alive exactly what finding someone meant when Sidious was the one doing the finding. "Not where you're going," she said. She deactivated one blade and clipped it to her belt, kept the other drawn, and stepped back to give him room to stand. He stood slowly. The dignity of it was automatic. She suspected he couldn't have moved without it if he tried. Tano, he said. What? He looked at her for a moment with the yellow eyes that had been frightening to her for years, and were now simply the eyes of a man who had made terrible choices, and was perhaps beginning to understand the full inventory of what they had cost him. Tell Skywalker, he said. Tell him to be faster than I was. She considered this. Tell him yourself, she said, when this is over. She walked him out of the throne room at Blade Point, through the wreckage of the corridor beyond, toward the sound of Rex's voice organizing the outer palace. Behind them, the cold room held its shadows. The sigils of the dead houses watched them go. Coruscant at midnight. The Senate district never fully sleeps. There are always lights in the upper floors of the administrative buildings, always transports moving through the lower lanes, always the low machinery hum of a government that operates across too many time zones to observe any single one of them. But there is a quality to the city at this hour that is different from the day. A thinning of the crowd noise that makes the architecture more visible, the distances between buildings more apparent, the whole artificial planet more legible as what it actually is. A construct, something built over something else, layer on layer on layer until whatever was original is too deep to find. Anakin walks through it with his hood up. He has been moving for 3 hours. Not toward anything specific, a circuit, a pattern, the kind of purposeless route that is the best counter-surveillance technique available when you cannot sweep for tails electronically, without the sweep itself being detectable. Left turn, right turn, transit, walk, transit again. He has passed the same monument 3 times from 3 different directions. He is reasonably certain no one is following him. Reasonably certain is the best available. Obi-Wan was already in the apartment when Anakin arrived. Not Bail's apartment, a different one, 2 districts away, belonging to a Republic intelligence contact whose name Anakin had never been given and had not asked for. Obi-Wan had arrived from Utapau 6 hours ago, quietly, on a transport that was not logged under his name. He looked exactly like a man who had killed General Grievous that morning and then immediately boarded a ship to deal with something worse. The particular brand of exhaustion that lived behind his eyes when he had been running on mission discipline for too long and had not yet been given permission to stop. He had not shaved. For Obi-Wan, this was the equivalent of another man's complete collapse. Grievous, Anakin said by way of greeting. Handled, Obi-Wan said, as anticipated. Boring? Almost insultingly so. He poured from the same kind of carafe that Bail had produced 3 days ago, which made Anakin wonder briefly if there was a standard safe house supply list he had never been briefed on. Sit down. Bail is on his way. Anakin sat. The apartment was small and scrupulously neutral. No personal items, no decoration. The furniture arranged for utility rather than comfort. A fold-out table had been set up in the main room's center with a portable holo projector and 3 datapads arranged around it, which meant Obi-Wan had been here long enough to set up a working surface, which meant he had been here longer than 6 hours. When did you land? Anakin asked. This morning, Obi-Wan said. Early, before you told me you landed. Yes, Anakin looked at him. I needed to verify something independently, Obi-Wan said, without apology, setting a cup in front of Anakin. I walked the Senate district. I observed the Chancellor's daily pattern from 3 separate positions. He sat across the table. He has increased his personal security detail in the last 48 hours. 2 additional guards on the executive building's east entrance, a modification to his transport protocol. His voice was even, clinical. He knows something has changed. The words settled in the room. He can't know specifically, Anakin said. No, but Palpatine has survived 60 years of Senate politics and a decade of war by being exceptionally sensitive to atmospheric shifts. He doesn't need specifics. Obi-Wan's eyes met his. He senses the change in you. He may not have named it yet, but he is responding to something. Anakin thought about the morning meeting 3 days ago. The way Palpatine's eyes had moved across his face with that genuine attentiveness, the assessment running underneath the performance of warmth. Then we move faster. Anakin said. Yes, Obi-Wan pulled one of the datapads toward him. Which is why tonight matters. Bail arrived 20 minutes later, Padmé with him. Anakin had known she would be there. He had known it since he told Bail to tell her. had been preparing for it across 3 days of preparation for other things, and still the moment she walked through the door carrying the specific self-possessed calm she deployed in high-stakes situations, the senator face, the one that showed nothing because she had decided nothing would be shown, hit him somewhere below rational thought. She looked at him for exactly 1 second before looking at the room as a whole. "Senator Amidala," Obi-Wan said. "Thank you for coming. Master Kenobi," she said. "The pleasure is muted by the circumstances." She set her bag on the table and removed a data rod. 18 months of documentation. Emergency powers expansions, executive influence over Military Creation Act provisions. Voting record irregularities in 12 Senate committees where the Chancellor's preferred outcomes were achieved through procedurally irregular means. She set the rod on the table beside Obi-Wan's datapad. "If this is what we believe it is, that is your prosecution case." "We believe it is," Obi-Wan said. "Then use it." She sat. The 4 of them around the fold-out table in a room that belonged to no one, the hollow projector between them, Coruscant's midnight city bleeding light through the narrow window. "Walk me through it," Anakin said. Obi-Wan ran the sequence. It had the compressed sequential clarity of a battle plan, which was essentially what it was. He laid it out in phases on the hollow projector, not elaborate schematics, just the structure, the order of operations. Phase 1 was already complete, the compound on Kamino. Nala Se had delivered ahead of schedule, 58 hours, 2 hours early, a fact Anakin suspected had cost her something personally that she would not discuss. The aerosolized derivative was distributed. 12 forward deployment bases and the 4 primary fleet flagships had received it through supply line integration, introduced into environmental systems via maintenance cycles that would not flag on any standard audit. The troopers would not know it had happened. Within the next 6 hours, the inhibitor chip degradation would be complete across the majority of the Grand Army's active force. Phase 2 was the evidence package in Padm's data rod. When the moment came, Bail would move it to the Senate floor through a procedural mechanism Padm had identified, an emergency session request that, under Senate rules, could not be delayed more than 2 hours once filed by a senior senator with appropriate clearances. Phase 3 was Maul. "Where is he?" Bail asked. "En route to Alderaan," Anakin said. "Ahsoka is with him. They broke Mandalorian orbit 14 hours ago on a transport filed as refugee processing." "He'll testify?" Padmé asked. "He'll testify." Anakin kept his voice flat. "He wants Sidious exposed as badly as we do. Possibly more. His testimony is unusual sourcing," Bail observed, in the tone of a man who had spent his career in rooms where sourcing mattered. "His testimony is the only first-person account in existence of Palpatine explicitly identifying himself as a Sith Lord," Obi-Wan said. "In the context of everything else in that data rod, it won't need to carry the case alone. It needs only to be the element that no one can explain away." Bail nodded. Conceded the point. Phase 4 was the Jedi Council, specifically Mace Windu and Yoda, brought in at the final moment before the confrontation, not briefed fully until then, not given time to convene, to deliberate, to run the matter through the committee processes that would create visibility. "Mace will object to being brought in late," Obi-Wan said. "Mace can object afterward," Anakin said. "At length, if he wants." "He will want." Obi-Wan's expression carried the specific neutrality of someone suppressing something. Phase 5. Phase 5 was Anakin. He had one more meeting scheduled with Palpatine. Tomorrow evening, the Chancellor had requested it 2 days ago, framed as a continuation of their ongoing discussions about the war's end and Anakin's role in the peace that followed. It was. Anakin now understood with the clarity of a man reading a text he had already read, and finally understanding the language. The setup for the Plagueis conversation. The move Palpatine had been building toward for months. He would attend. He would sit in that chair and listen to whatever the Chancellor was ready to say, and perform every expected response. The interest, the hunger, the particular wounds that Palpatine had spent 2 decades carefully opening. He would be exactly what he was supposed to be. And then Ahsoka would land on Coruscant with Maul, and Bail would file the emergency session request, and the compound would have finished its work in the clone trooper's blood, and everything would move at once. "He'll sense something," Padmé said. when you sit across from him tomorrow. He reads people. He reads the version of me he built. Anakin said. He'll be looking for confirmation of what he expects to find. People usually are. Padmé looked at him steadily. Something moved in her expression, carefully contained, something that she was choosing to keep off her face for now and deal with later, privately, when there was time. He recognized the method. He used it himself. The timing has to be exact, she said. It will be, Obi-Wan said. He looked at Anakin. How are you sleeping? Better than you'd think, Anakin said. It was almost true. They held the plan in the room for another hour, walking through contingencies, failure points, the things that could go wrong in each phase, and what the fallback looked like. Obi-Wan ran the contingencies the way he ran everything, methodically, without drama, giving each worst-case scenario exactly the attention it required, and no more. At one point, Padmé reached across the table and put her hand over Anakin's. She didn't say anything. The room kept talking around them, Obi-Wan and Bail working through a logistical question about the Senate session filing window. He turned his hand over under hers. They stayed like that for the rest of the meeting. When it ended and they moved toward the door in pairs, Padmé paused beside him while Bail and Obi-Wan exchanged quiet words near the entry. Anakin, she said. Low. I know, he said. She looked at him for a moment, the senator face gone. Just her. Just this. Come home. After. I will, he said. He meant it the way he always meant the things he said to her. Completely, and with the full knowledge that meaning something completely had never once been sufficient guarantee of anything. But tonight, it felt closer to sufficient than it usually did. He pulled his hood up and walked out into Coruscant's midnight. The trap was set. Now they waited for morning. Palpatine's private office at evening, not the reception room where he held court for senators and generals, and the endless procedural traffic of the Republic's governing apparatus. The inner office, the one behind the larger space, accessed through a door that most visitors never saw opened. The bookshelves here hold actual physical volumes, a deliberate anachronism in a galaxy that stores everything digitally. The spines old and dark and smelling of the same polished wood and stone that saturates the entire suite. A single lamp burns on the desk. The window behind it frames Coruscant's evening skyline, the city's lights beginning to assert themselves against the dying light, a million illuminated windows making the planet look, from this height, almost beautiful. Palpatine sits behind the desk. Anakin sits across from it. They have been here for 40 minutes. The first 30 had been ordinary. Or ordinary in the way that these meetings had always been. The surface warmth, the Chancellor's studied informality, the careful construction of an atmosphere that felt like relief from the institutional coldness of the Jedi Temple. Palpatine had asked about Obi-Wan's mission, expressed satisfaction at Grievous's elimination, observed, with the precisely calibrated regret of a man who had been observing it for years, that the Council would likely find some new way to withhold the recognition Anakin deserved even now, even after everything. Anakin had given him everything he needed, the slight tension in the jaw, the eyes that moved away for a moment at the mention of the Council, the particular quality of silence that Palpatine had learned to read, over 20 years, as Anakin swallowing something he didn't trust himself to say. The Chancellor had leaned forward slightly, and now they were here. There is something I have been meaning to share with you, Palpatine said. For some time, in fact. I have waited for the right moment. He folded his hands on the desk, unhurried, the lamplight making his face look older and somehow more itself, more the face it actually was, underneath the public performance. I believe that moment is now. I'm listening. Anakin said. Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? The name landed in the room and sat there. Anakin held it with the same steady attentiveness he'd been holding everything for the last 40 minutes. I don't think so, he said. Palpatine settled back slightly. He spoke the way he always spoke when he was giving Anakin something, with the cadence of a gift being unwrapped slowly, each layer deliberate. The pleasure of the giving as important as the content. Darth Plagueis was a Dark Lord of the Sith, he said. so powerful, so wise, that he could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life. A pause, measured. He had such a mastery of the living Force that he could actually keep the ones he cared about from dying. Anakin's hands rested on the arms of the chair. He could actually keep people from dying? He said. The hunger in his voice was real. He had not manufactured it. He did not need to. The thing Palpatine was describing had lived in his chest as a wound for 20 years, and the wound did not know that the man offering to address it was the one who had opened it in the first place. But Anakin knew. And knowing. While feeling. While performing the feeling authentically, because it was authentic. That was the specific discipline the last 6 days had required of him, and he had found, to his own complicated surprise, that he was equal to it. The Force is not merely a defensive art. Palpatine continued, his voice warming into the familiar register of a teacher sharing something precious. Its full potential has been suppressed by those who feared what its mastery might mean, what it might make possible. His eyes held Anakin steadily. Plagueis discovered things the Jedi would never teach you, things they cannot teach you because they have chosen not to know them. What happened to him? Anakin asked. This Plagueis. He was betrayed, Palpatine said, by his apprentice while he slept. The regret in his voice was exquisitely placed. Ironic. A man who could save others from death, but not himself. Anakin looked at him. In the lamplight, at this distance, across this desk that he had sat across dozens of times, Anakin looked at the face of the man who had said these words to him once before, in another version of events that had not happened, would not happen. The version where no hologram call had been made, and no 11 minutes of intelligence had been laid out in careful sequence in a cramped calm alcove above Mandalore. He looked at the face of the man who had killed his mother's chances of freedom, who had built a war that consumed a galaxy and filled it with a generation of engineered soldiers who were 3 days ago still carrying the means of their own corruption in their skulls, who had looked at a 9-year-old boy on a Senate corridor and begun, in that moment, the longest and most precise act of cruelty Anakin had ever encountered, who had loved him in the specific way that predators love the things they have decided to use. He kept his face exactly right. Is it possible, Anakin said carefully, to learn this power? Palpatine's expression shifted. Small, a degree of warmth added to what was already warm, a door opening that had been held slightly shut. Not from a Jedi, he said. The silence that followed was the one he was supposed to fill with the next question. The question that would complete the sequence, that would cross the threshold from receiving information to asking to be brought through a door. Anakin had thought about this moment for 6 days. He had rehearsed the permutations of it, the different angles, the various ways it could go. He looked at Palpatine's hands folded on the desk, and he deviated. I know who you are, Anakin said. The room did not change. The lamp burned the same. The city outside went on lighting itself window by window against the evening. Palpatine's hands did not move on the desk. But something in his face did. It was extraordinarily small, a micro-adjustment at the corners of his eyes. The faintest recalibration behind them, a man's internal machinery briefly visible through a gap in the facade that closed again almost instantly. If Anakin had not been watching for precisely this, he would have missed it. My boy, Palpatine began, in the voice of gentle confusion. Darth Sidious, Anakin said. Quiet. Flat. The name placed in the room with the same precision Nala Se used on her formulation panel. You have been Darth Sidious since before I was born. You engineered the war, both sides of it. The Separatists answered to Dooku, who answered to you. The clone army was commissioned through intermediaries you controlled. The inhibitor chips in every clone trooper's skull were designed to trigger on your order. He did not raise his voice. You have been building toward me specifically for 20 years. Palpatine looked at him. The warmth was gone. It did not drain gradually. It did not have a gradient. It simply ceased, the way a performance ceases when the performer decides the audience is no longer relevant. What remained in its absence was something older and colder and more itself. The face of a man who has spent 60 years being exactly what he wanted to be and had not, until this moment, been required to show it to Anakin Skywalker. "How long have you known?" he said. His voice was different. Not dramatically. It was still the same voice, same register, same controlled production, but it carried no warmth now. And without the warmth it sounded the way all truly dangerous things sound when they stop pretending, exact and patient and entirely without mercy. "Long enough to make arrangements," Anakin said. Something moved behind Palpatine's eyes. The assessment, running at full speed now, mapping what Anakin could mean by arrangements, what he could have done, who he could have spoken to, what could have been moved without appearing in the surveillance architecture Sidious had built across the Senate, the Temple, the various information networks he had seeded with eyes over the course of a political career that now spanned most of Anakin's lifetime. "You have been alone in this," Palpatine said. "Not a statement of fact. A test." "No," Anakin said. Another micro-adjustment, faster this time. "Ahsoka Tano," Palpatine said. "Among others." The hands on the desk unfolded. Slowly, the fingers spread slightly against the desktop's surface. Anakin, the warmth attempted a return, a single calculated pulse of it, the father voice, the oldest weapon in the inventory. "Whatever she told you, whatever doubts she has planted, you must understand that she came to you carrying a warning from a man who wanted you dead. Maul's information was real. His concern for you was not. He told her what Sidious intended because he wanted her to step aside and let him destroy you first. That is the source of everything you have built this on." Anakin held his gaze without moving. "I know exactly what Maul asked her," he said. "She told me. That was the first thing she told me. He let that sit for one beat. She refused him, came to me anyway, and told me the truth about both, what you are and what he wanted. That is not the action of someone who was manipulated. That is the action of someone whose judgment I trust completely." Something shifted in Palpatine's eyes. The recalculation adjusting for a variable that had not been in the model. "She is landing on Coruscant," Anakin said with Maul in custody. "Right now, as we are having this conversation." He held the Chancellor's gaze. "Bail Organa has filed an emergency Senate session. It convenes in 90 minutes. Padmé Amidala has 18 months of documented evidence of constitutional violations that will be entered into the Senate record the moment that session opens." He paused. "The inhibitor chips in the clone troopers are gone. The compound finished its work 6 hours ago. The room held the information." Palpatine was very still. "She is already safe," Anakin said. "And you have nothing left." What happened to Palpatine's face then was not something Anakin had a clean word for. It was not rage. Not immediately. Rage was a response. And what crossed his face first was something more primary. The reaction of a man who has operated for 60 years from the position of the only person in any room who knows what is actually happening. Encountering for the first time the experience of being the last to know. Then the rage arrived. It came up through him like something structural giving way, not an expression, but a transformation. The careful architecture of Chancellor Palpatine shedding itself the way a husk sheds when what's inside has outgrown it. The face that remained was the true one. Older, harder, the eyes gone from their performed warmth to something that had never been warm at all. He rose from behind the desk. The robes fell differently on him now. The room's single lamp threw new shadows. Outside, Coruscant kept lighting its windows against the dark, indifferent to the specific thing occurring on one of its upper floors. "You," Sidious said, and his voice now was the graveled, ancient, merciless thing it actually was, "have no idea what you have done." Anakin stood. "I'm beginning to," he said. His hand moved to his lightsaber, and the door behind him opened. The blue blade ignites. The sound of it fills the office the way it always fills enclosed spaces, not loud, precisely, but complete. The hum of it occupying every frequency that matters, leaving no room for anything else. The lamplight and the lightsaber light fight each other across the bookshelves and the dark spines of the physical volumes and the window and Sidious's face. And the result is something that looks less like an office and more like what it has always been underneath. A room where the most powerful dark side practitioner alive has been conducting the longest deception in galactic history. Anakin holds the blade between himself and the man across the desk. Sidious has not moved. He stands behind the desk in the ruins of Chancellor Palpatine, the performed warmth gone so completely that it is difficult, now, to remember it as real. The way a magic trick stops being impressive the moment you understand the mechanism. His eyes are on Anakin's blade, with the calm assessment of a man who has been in rooms with lightsabers before, and has never once been the one who lost. Then the window behind him explodes inward. Ahsoka comes through it feet first. She hits the floor in a roll that brings her up with both white blades already ignited, glass still falling around her, the evening air of Coruscant rushing in through the shattered frame. She has been on planet for 40 minutes. She came directly from the landing pad. She takes up position at Sidious's left, cutting off the window as an exit. Sidious turns his head to look at her. In the same moment, the office's inner door, the one behind Anakin, the one he came through 40 minutes ago, opens, and Mace Windu steps through it with his purple blade burning in his right hand. Yoda moving into the room beside him, the ancient master's own green saber a small, steady light in the room's contested illumination. The four of them hold the geometry. Anakin at center, blade between himself and the desk. Ahsoka at the window, left flank. Mace at the inner door, right, Yoda at Mace's shoulder, close to the floor, watching with the absolute stillness of someone who has been watching things for 900 years and has learned to wait until the shape of a situation becomes fully visible. Sidious looks at all of them. Something moves across his face that Anakin has never seen there before. It is brief and quickly controlled, and it is the specific expression of a man whose contingency planning has just encountered a contingency it did not contain. Mace Windu, Sidious says. His voice is perfectly steady. And young Ahsoka Tano. What a remarkably complete gathering. It is, Mace said. Surrender, Palpatine, Sidious smiled. He moved before the smile finished. The desk went first, force flung with a violence that had nothing procedural about it, the heavy piece of furniture crossing the room at lethal velocity. Anakin stopped it with one hand extended, the force catching it mid-trajectory, and shunted it left into the bookshelf. Physical volumes cascaded from the shelves. The lamp went over and the room lost its warm light, and resolved into the harder illumination of 3 lightsaber blades and the city beyond the broken window. Sidious had crossed half the room while Anakin managed the desk. He had 2 lightsabers. Anakin had known this theoretically, the research, the outline of the man as Obi-Wan had described him. The records of the duel in this very building that existed in fragmented intelligence files, but theory and the reality of watching the twin red blades materialize in Sidious's hands from the folds of his robe were different experiences. The blades came up in a crossed guard that opened immediately into an aggressive stance, the footwork already moving. And the man who had spent 40 years as a shuffling bureaucrat moved like something that had been pretending to be old. Mace closed first. His Vapad form was the right choice against a dark-side opponent. The style fed on the opponent's own aggression, used the darkness being channeled against the wielder as fuel, turned the most powerful dark-side attacks into something that strengthened rather than depleted the practitioner. Anakin had seen Mace in combat before. He had never seen him in combat like this, the full weight of it, no restraint, the purple blade moving in combinations that were individually too fast to track, and collectively formed a pressure system that pushed Sidious 3 steps back toward the desk's wreckage. Sidious absorbed it and responded. The twin blades split the combination, threaded between Mace's guard at an angle that should not have been geometrically available, and Mace took the redirect by pivoting his entire body weight in a direction that cost him distance instead of damage. He reset 6 feet back, breathing controlled, blade up. Ahsoka came in off Sidious's blind left. Her dual blades worked in the alternating rhythm she had developed over years of exactly this. The 2 weapons not mirroring each other, but operating in complementary counters, one blade drawing the response and the other arriving in the gap that response created. She had used this against opponents faster than her and stronger than her, and she had won most of those encounters. Sidious caught both blades simultaneously in a crossed block and pushed. The force behind the push was not physical. It was the full weight of a man who had been building his power in the dark side since before she was born, and it hit her like a wall. She went back 4 meters, feet leaving the floor for 2 of them, and landed in a controlled skid that put her back against the room's far wall. She was up before Anakin called her name. "I'm fine," she said, and came back in. Anakin held the center. This was what the outline of the plan had looked like in theory, worked out in the safe house apartment at midnight, with Obi-Wan and a portable holo projector, Mace as pressure, Ahsoka as disruption, Anakin at center coordinating the geometry, making the adjustments in real time, filling the gaps that the other two created and were created by. In theory, it had looked like a tactical exercise. In practice, it looked like three people fighting the most dangerous being any of them had ever encountered in an enclosed space, while trying not to hit each other. Sidious moved between all three of them in a way that denied any single opponent a sustained engagement. A burst of pressure against Mace, a pivot to intercept Ahsoka, a redirect back through center that brought him into Anakin's range before breaking away again. He was not fighting to win, not yet. He was fighting to separate them. Every combination was designed less to damage than to create the moment when one of them was isolated. When the three-way geometry collapsed into a one-on-one that he could end quickly and then address the remaining two. He almost got it 3 times. The first, Ahsoka, pushed back again, left a gap on the window side that Sidious angled toward, forcing Mace to overextend to cover it, and briefly removing him from the center exchange. Anakin recognized the setup and stepped directly into the angle, absorbing a hit on his prosthetic forearm that scored the durasteel without penetrating, and drove Sidious back toward the desk wreckage. The second, Mace, pressing hard with a Va-Pod combination that was winning the exchange, left his right side open for a half-second that Sidious found with his left blade. Ahsoka's right blade arrived at the same moment from the other direction, and Sidious took the block instead of the score, but the interruption of Mace's combination gave Sidious a reset he used to clear distance and reacquire the room's center. The third, Sidious used the Force to hurl 3 of the displaced physical volumes at Ahsoka simultaneously, low, mid, and high. The spread designed to require her full attention, and in the 2 seconds she spent deflecting them he drove at Mace with a combination that punched through 2 guards and opened a cut along Mace's left arm. Not deep, not disabling, but a score, and the satisfaction in Sidious's expression as it landed was the first genuinely uncontrolled thing Anakin had seen in his face. Mace did not slow down. Sidious took stock mid-fight the way great tacticians always did, not stopping, not withdrawing, but allocating a fraction of processing to assessment while the rest ran the engagement. Anakin could see him doing it. The eyes moved across all 3 of them in the brief intervals between exchanges, reading, recalculating. He landed on Anakin. "You must be proud," Sidious said, directly at him, the twin blades working a holding pattern as he addressed his words to the center of the room. His voice was even in a way that the physical intensity of what he had just been doing should have made impossible. 3 of you. A coordinated ambush. I taught you to think strategically, Anakin. I should not be surprised that you learned. Anakin said nothing. "She is not here," Sidious said. Lower now, more specific. "Padmé, she is somewhere in the Senate building. Somewhere safe, you believe." The smile. "What if she isn't? What if the one contingency you did not plan for, she's safe?" Anakin said. "Are you certain?" The thing about Palpatine's manipulation, Anakin had come to understand across 6 days of dissecting it, was that it worked best on wounds. It needed an opening. A place where certainty had not fully formed, where the scar tissue was thin enough that a precise application of doubt could reopen something that had seemed healed. He had spent 20 years providing those openings. He thought of Padmé's hand over his at the safe house table. He thought of Ahsoka's voice on the hologram, "I trust you," the simplest thing she'd said and the truest. He thought of Obi-Wan's voice on the encrypted channel saying together, "As we always have." The doubt found no purchase. "Yes," he said. "I'm certain." Something shifted in Sidious's eyes. He raised both hands. The lightning came from both palms simultaneously, not divided, but unified. A single output directed not at Anakin or Mace but at Ahsoka. A deliberate choice, the weakest structural link in the triangle, and it came with the full force of everything Sidious had been reserving across the entire engagement. Nothing held back. The room going blue-white with the intensity of it. Ahsoka moved. but not fast enough. The lightning closed the distance before her dodge completed, and she threw both blades up in a cross block that was rated to handle force lightning in the technical sense of the word handle, and was not rated for this volume of it, and she held it for 1 second, 2. The white blades going bright under the load, her arms shaking. Anakin was already moving. He moves between Ahsoka and the lightning before the decision completes. There is no gap between the intention and the body, no moment of weighing, no fraction of hesitation where the calculation runs and returns a result. His feet find the floor between them and his hands come up, and the lightning hits his bare palms, and the world goes white. It is not like anything he has felt before. It runs through his flesh hand and up his arm and across his chest and down his spine and into his prosthetic and back up again in a loop that has no exit. The current finding every nerve that exists, and some he didn't know did. The smell of scorched skin immediate and specific, his teeth locking against the sound that tries to come out of his throat. He does not make the sound. He stands in it with his feet planted, and his palms open, and his eyes. Ahsoka sees this, registers it, files it in the part of her that will not stop functioning even now. His eyes stay blue. Not yellowing at the edges, not reddening. Blue, the same unremarkable human blue they have always been, looking out from a face that is in considerable pain, and is not, in any visible way, being consumed by it. Sidious pours more into the current. Anakin's feet do not move. He finds the center of it by instinct. Not a technique he was taught. The Jedi did not teach Tutaminis as a standard curriculum item, and what he knows of it he assembled from fragments, from old texts, from the specific intuition of someone whose relationship with the Force had always been less mediated than other practitioners. He had read about the principle, that Force lightning was energy. And energy in the Force was not inherently dark or light, and a practitioner who was sufficiently grounded in the living Force could, theoretically, absorb and redirect energy rather than simply resist it. He had never tested the theory. He tests it now. He stops pushing against the current and instead opens toward it, a choice that costs him 3 seconds of agony that make the previous seconds feel mild. His whole body an active conductor for something that is trying to unmake him from the inside out. But underneath the pain, underneath the sheer physical catastrophe of it, there is the Force. And the Force runs through him the way it always has. Vast and clean and older than any specific use anyone has ever made of it. He finds the channel. Sidious feels it before he sees it. The current begins returning. Not all at once, not the dramatic reversal of a practitioner who has lost control, but incrementally, the energy cycling back through the connection, rather than being absorbed into its target. His expression does not change immediately. He pours more into it, the instinctive response of a man who has won every test of raw power he has ever encountered by escalating until the opposition breaks. The current returns faster. His eyes move to Anakin's hands. The lightning is flowing back along its own path, coursing from Anakin's palms back toward its source, in a stream that is visibly becoming less divided, the gap between output and return narrowing as Anakin's control deepens. Sidious's own hands begin to register the feedback. Not painfully, not yet, but the current is present where it should not be, running back against its intended direction. He cannot simply stop. The release point has passed. Cutting off Force lightning mid-output had consequences even for a practitioner of his level, the energy requiring somewhere to go. He has, for the first time in 60 years of calculated conflict, made a move that has no clean counter. Anakin takes 1 step toward him. Mace moves left. He has been reading the engagement geometry for the 30 seconds since the lightning began, the Vapad Master's combat mind tracking the real-time shifts in advantage that most fighters would miss. His purple blade held ready at his right side while he waits for the precise moment. He has been waiting for it without impatience, without the need to act simply because action is available, the specific discipline of a man who understands that sometimes the most powerful thing a fighter can do is hold position and let the correct moment arrive. It arrives. He crosses the room in 4 steps, and his blade takes Sidious's right-hand weapon at the hilt. Not a slash, but a precise lock and torque that leverages the momentary division of Sidious's attention between the returning current and the room's other occupants. The weapon clears Sidious's hand and hits the floor. Mace steps back into his guard, blade up, face carrying the controlled focus of a man doing exactly what he came here to do. Sidious's eyes snap to him. In that fraction of a second, Ahsoka moves. She has both blades back in her hands. Her left shoulder carries the burn from the lightning where it hit her before Anakin stepped in front of it. She can feel it in the joint, a deep structural heat that she files for later. She comes around Sidious's left, not at his remaining weapon but at his feet. A low-angled approach that forces him to choose between addressing Mace at his right, Anakin in front of him, and the new threat below his guard. A being can only look in 3 directions consecutively, not simultaneously. He chooses Anakin. Anakin takes another step. The lightning between them has fully reversed now, flowing from his palms in a sustained stream that is visibly connected to its source, the current running a closed circuit back toward the hands that generated it. His arms are shaking. The burn across his palms has the deep, structural quality of damage that will need real attention and will not receive it until this is finished. He can feel the limit of what he can sustain approaching in the way that physical limits announce themselves, not as pain, which he is already past, but as a structural awareness that the system carrying the load is approaching its edge. He walks toward Sidious. Step by step. Steady, the floor of the ruined office under his feet. The glass from the window Ahsoka came through still crunching underfoot in places, the overturned furniture and displaced books of Chancellor Palpatine's private collection scattered across the floor of a room that will not look like this room again. Sidious looks at his face. He is searching for something specific. Anakin can see the search running. The yellow eyes moving across his features with the same cataloging attention that Chancellor Palpatine deployed in 40 minutes of warm conversation. The same intelligence that has been reading him since he was 9 years old. He is looking for the crack. The place where the pain or the fear or the anger at what is being done to his body has opened a door into the darkness. The door that has always been there. The door Sidious has spent 20 years carefully identifying and keeping oiled. He finds nothing. The face looking back at him is in pain, and is steady and is blue-eyed, and is entirely present, and is not going to give him what he needs. "You cannot sustain this," Sidious said. His voice, even now, carries its controlled precision. "Your body is failing under the load. In another 30 seconds, I only need 10, Anakin said. He drives the current back. Not a surge. A focused, deliberate redirection. The channel he found and has been maintaining now opened fully, the entire volume of energy reversing through the connection and returning to its source with the additional force of everything Anakin has been holding in reserve. It hits Sidious in the hands and the chest and he goes back a step. 2, his remaining weapon dropping as his grip fails, his arms coming up in the instinctive defensive posture of a man whose offense has become his exposure. Mace is there. The purple blade catches Sidious's remaining weapon as it rises defensively, locks it, and drives it aside with a force that comes from 3 years of waiting for the chance to do exactly this. No hesitation, no moment of uncertainty about what this moment requires. The weapon clears. Ahsoka is there. Her right blade crosses behind Sidious's knees, not cutting, positioning, the geometry of it removing the backward retreat as an option, completing the enclosure. Anakin is there. He stops the current. The connection breaks cleanly. His hands drop to his sides, the burn across the palms immediate and total and irrelevant, and he looks at the man in front of him, cornered between 3 blades and a broken window, and the wreckage of an office he has occupied for decades, stripped of every weapon and every tool and every performed identity, and he sees what is actually there. An old man. Withered. The true face more visible now than it has ever been in their years together, more lined, more ancient, more like the thing it actually is without the warmth operating as camouflage. He is breathing hard. His hands are damaged from his own current finding its way home. He is looking at Anakin with the yellow eyes and in them. Behind the rage and behind the calculation and behind the operatic fury of a man whose life's work has just been dismantled in 1 week by people he underestimated, there is something that Anakin can only identify as surprise. Genuine surprise. He truly did not believe this was possible. "It's over," Anakin said. Sidious gathered himself for one more attempt. Anakin could feel it building. The dark side coiling for something. A last desperate reach for the tool that had failed 30 seconds ago, or something new. And Mace felt it too, because the purple blade moved, and Ahsoka's right blade was already in position. Anakin's blue blade ignited. He drove it home with total clarity. No hesitation. No anguish. No moment of weighing what this cost him, or what it meant, or who he was becoming by doing it. Those were the calculations of a man who had not yet made his decision. And Anakin had made his in a cramped calm alcove above Mandalore, when a hologram of someone he trusted told him the truth about his life. Sidious fell. The three of them stand in the wrecked office. The hum of 3 lightsabers fills the silence, and then, one by one, they extinguish. The room resolves back into whatever light the broken window lets in, the city beyond it, the million illuminated windows of a planet that does not yet know what just happened in this room. Ahsoka moves first. She crosses to Anakin and takes his right hand, the flesh one, the burned one, and turns it over in both of hers, reading the damage with the focused attention of someone doing a field assessment. It is bad. She can see that in her face before she controls the expression. "I've had worse," he said. "You've had worse because you keep doing things like this," she said. The words come out rough at the edges. She does not let go of his hand. Mace looks at both of them across the room. His left arm carries the cut from the engagement, dried now, not serious, the kind of wound a Jedi Master absorbs and does not mention until later. He looks at Anakin with the expression of a man who has been recalculating something across the duration of the fight and has arrived at a new number. "Skywalker," he said. "Master Windu." A pause. Mace's jaw moves slightly, the recalculation completing. "You should have told the council sooner." "Yes," Anakin said. "I should have." Another pause. "You were right not to," Mace said. It costs him something, the admission, not because it isn't true, but because truth and the structured order of how things should have gone are different categories. And Mace Windu has spent his life in the second category, and is being asked, right now, to fully inhabit the first. We would have moved too visibly. Too soon. Anakin looked at him. "I know. I don't enjoy knowing that. I know that too." Something moved in Mace's expression that was not quite the thaw of a glacier, but was perhaps the beginning of the conditions that make a thaw possible. He looked at Ahsoka. He looked at the room. He looked at the thing on the floor that had been the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic for 13 years, and the secret architect of everything that had tried to destroy them all. "It's done," he said. Not triumph. Relief, the exhalation of a man who has been carrying a weight whose full dimensions he only now understands. Yoda, who has not spoken since entering the room, who has stood in the corner through the entire engagement with his blade extinguished, and his eyes open and 900 years of quiet attention running behind them, speaks now. "Done," he said. And begun. He looked at Anakin, at Ahsoka, at both of them together. Much work remains. But the shadow, he paused, the ancient eyes steady. The shadow is ended. Outside, Coruscant went on lighting its windows against the dark, one by one, the way it always had. The news breaks across the HoloNet at 0300. Not cleanly, nothing this large breaks cleanly. It moves the way seismic events move, in waves that arrive at different places at different speeds, each wave carrying a version of the information shaped by who is transmitting it, and what they understood, and what they were willing to say. The first reports are fragmented. An incident in the Chancellor's office, emergency Senate session convened. Republic security forces on elevated alert across Coruscant's government district. Within an hour the fragments cohere into something legible. Within 2 hours Padmé's documented evidence is in the Senate record, and the shape of what Palpatine actually was becomes undeniable. The emergency powers dissolve by morning vote. Not unanimously. There are senators who vote against dissolution out of genuine belief in the Chancellor's legitimacy, and there are senators who vote against it because they have spent years building their influence on the architecture Palpatine constructed, and are not ready to watch it go. But the vote carries. The majority holds. Bail Organa watches the tally from the Senate floor with the contained, exhausted expression of a man who has been working toward a single moment for 18 months, and finds, now that it has arrived, that it looks less like triumph and more like the beginning of a very long cleanup operation. He is correct. It does. Across the galaxy, in the hours following, the clone troopers stand down. Not all at once, the order never comes, and its absence is its own kind of signal, propagating through the command structure in the specific confusion of an expected transmission that does not arrive. On 100 ships and a dozen ground campaigns, clone commanders check and recheck their command channels and find them quiet. Some of them contact Jedi commanders directly. Some of them simply wait. On the flagship of the 501st, Captain Rex sits in the command chair and feels something in his skull that he cannot name. A loosening. The faint chemical residue of something that has finished its work and departed. He will not understand what it was for another week. When Anakin tells him in full, in a room with no recording devices, everything that happened on Camino. When Rex understands, he is quiet for a long time. Then he says, "Tell Nala say that Fives would have wanted to know." Anakin tells him, he already did. The Jedi Temple 3 days after. The council chamber holds all 12 seats filled for the first time in months, the holograms replaced by physical presence, masters recalled from the field. The war's active campaigns winding toward ceasefire as the separatist command structure, deprived of the central intelligence that had been coordinating it for a decade, begins its slow collapse into factional disorder. There will be negotiations. There will be a peace process that is long and imperfect and built on the rubble of something that never should have been allowed to exist. None of that happens today. Today the council sits with the immediate question. Mace speaks first. He has the cut on his left arm covered by his sleeve and the expression of a man who slept poorly and has decided that this is not relevant information. The order owes a debt, he said. He does not qualify it. He does not distribute the blame across circumstances or time or the genuine difficulty of perceiving what Sidious had worked so hard to make imperceptible. He says it plainly and lets it sit. We were blind. We were manipulated, yes, but also, in some ways we chose not to see what was difficult to see. That requires acknowledgement before anything else. The chamber holds it. Yoda in his seat closes his eyes briefly, opens them. Acknowledge it, we do, he said. Learn from it we must. Change it we will. Or fail the next generation as we failed this one. The weight of 900 years in 4 sentences. No one in the room speaks immediately after. Then Mace looks across the chamber. Ahsoka Tano, he said. The council formally acknowledges that the charges brought against you were unjust. That you were failed by this institution at a moment when it should have protected you. He holds her gaze. We ask you to return. Not as we were, we are asking you to help us become something better. There is a seat on this council. It is yours, under whatever terms you choose to name. Ahsoka looks at him for a moment. She has thought about this. Not in the last 3 days, she has barely slept in the last 3 days, but in the months since she walked out of the temple, in the quiet between missions and the long hours aboard ships where there was nothing to do but think. She has thought about what she would say if this moment ever arrived, and what she wanted. And whether what she wanted had changed since the day she decided the order as it existed was not something she could continue to be part of. Yes, she said. With conditions. Mace nodded once. The closest his face came to relief. Name them. The culture of secrecy around attachment, she said. The rule that treats love as contamination instead of as something that makes us human. Or whatever we each are, that requires examination. Not necessarily abolition, examination honestly, with input from people who have lived with the consequences of it. She holds the council's collective gaze. If we had been a culture that allowed honesty about attachment, Anakin would never have had to hide anything from us. Palpatine's leverage would not have existed. We fix the vulnerability, or we wait for the next person who knows how to exploit it. The chamber absorbs this. Yoda speaks. Correct, you are, he said. Simply, without qualification. Begin that examination, we will. Then they look at Anakin. He has been sitting in his seat, still no mastery rank. the distinction feeling even more procedural than it usually does, with the bandaged hands resting on the chair's arms and the expression of a man who slept 6 hours for the first time in a week and found it insufficient. "There is something I should have told this council years ago," he said. He tells them. Not quickly, not the compressed tactical briefing of the safe house apartment. He tells them the way the thing actually is, with the full texture of it, the years of it, what it has cost him to carry it in secret, and what it cost him to watch the secrecy become the vulnerability that almost destroyed everything. He tells them about Padmé. The chamber is very quiet when he finishes. Mace looks at him across the space between their seats. Something is being decided in real time behind his eyes. The strict interpretation of the code and the reality of what Anakin has just done for the Order, and the galaxy sitting on opposite sides of a scale that has been recalibrating since the night in the ruined office. The code says what it says. Mace said finally. "I know," Anakin said. "And you chose differently." "I did." A long pause. "You saved this Order," Mace said. "You saved the Republic. You gave us the opportunity to become what we should have been." He is quiet for a moment more. "The Council will not expel you, Skywalker. What the Council will do is have a very long series of very uncomfortable conversations about the rules we have been treating as fixed points that may in fact be." He stops. The word clearly costs him something. "Negotiable." From across the chamber, quietly, Yoda makes a sound that in 900 years of living has refined itself into something that is not quite a laugh, but is adjacent to one. Padmé's apartment at dawn, 6 weeks later. The city below is doing what it always does. The endless arterial traffic. The stacked lanes. The 10 million ordinary things that constitute life on a planet that has just survived something extraordinary and is returning, as life always returns, to the business of being ordinary. The medic leaves at 0600. Anakin sits on the edge of the bed with one child in his arms. The bandaging on his palms has been gone for 3 weeks. The skin beneath it carrying new scar tissue that he has been told will fade, and suspects will not entirely. He holds the child carefully, the way he holds things he is afraid of damaging, with more attention than force. Ahsoka is in the chair by the window with the other one. She is looking at the child in her arms with the expression of someone encountering a category of thing they have no prior framework for, and are constructing one in real time. It is not discomfort. It is closer to the specific wonder of a person who has been in combat for most of their adult life, suddenly holding something that has never been in combat, that has no concept of it, that exists entirely outside the world she has been living in. "They're small," she said. "They're supposed to be," Anakin said. "I know they're supposed to be. I'm noting it." He looked at her across the room, at Ahsoka Tano, who walked into a hologram call and chose vulnerability over self-protection, and said the thing that needed to be said to the person who needed to hear it. And by that choice preserved something that should have been preserved and wasn't, in all the versions of this story where she stayed silent. "Snips," he said. She looked up from the child. "I trust you," he said. "I always did." She looked at him for a moment. The dawn light coming through the window was pale and clean, the city below them going about its ordinary business. The 2 children between them impossibly small and entirely present. "I know," she said. "That's why I told you." The child in her arms made a sound. Small, formless, the first experiments of a voice with no words yet. She looked back down at it. Outside, Coruscant lit itself into morning. The family sat whole in the new light, nothing left unfinished, nothing left unsaid. And for the first time, in a very long time, the silence between them carried no weight at all. "Let us know what you'd like to see next." The end.